Hi, my name is Deanne Barr. I am the author of such psychological thrillers as Expired Listings, Slashing Mona Lisa, and the upcoming domestic suspense thriller, Saving Grace. And that is available now for pre-order on Amazon, so please pick up a copy. Today, I'm getting to interview Kaye George, who I've been friends with on Facebook for, I guess, about a year. She has always amused me with her pithy comments. She's a very funny lady, and I was hoping to meet her at an upcoming convention, but unfortunately they were all canceled this year. So next best thing is to interview her on Author Groupie. She's written a number of mysteries and short stories. I think you'll find her charming and interesting. So please sit back, enjoy, and as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Kaye George, who's been a Facebook friend of mine for a long time, but now I finally gotten to meet her. She is a national best-selling, multi-award winning author of several different mystery series. People of the Wind, 2 books, is prehistory mysteries published by Untreed Reads that feature Neanderthal characters and also include others like Cro-Magnon and Denisovan. I hope I said that right. The first book was nominated for the Agatha Award. What? What is it?
Denisovan.
Thank you, Denisovan.
Yeah.
The first book was nominated for an Agatha Award for Best Historical Novel. Her traditional series include the Cressa Caraway musical mysteries, which are 2 books, the first of which was a finalist for the Silver Falchion Award, and the humorous Texas Imogene Duckworthy series, which are 3 books, the first of which was nominated for an Agatha for Best First Book. For Cozy, she's published the Fat Cat series, 3 books, all Barnes & Noble bestseller. And for Penguin, under the name Janet Cantrell, she's had 2 books released in the Vintage Sweet series from Lyrical Press in March and June of 2020. The newest was just released and is titled Deadly Sweet Tooth. Welcome to Author Groupie.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Tell us about Deadly Sweet Tooth and the series. What inspired you to write it, and what exactly are vintage sweets?
What inspired me to write it was my Janet Cantrell series, the Fat Cat series, which I wrote for Berkeley Prime, which is no more, got a huge following, and people actually 4 years later, the last book was 2016, people are still asking me, when is there going to be another Fat Cat book? That project was a work for hire, which is another whole subject, but it's not possible for me to write any more of those books. So I wanted to draw those people in to write something for the people who wanted another Fat Cat book. So I chose a Maine Coon to put in this book. Maine Coon isn't a fat cat, but it's a big cat. And my character makes things to eat like the main character in the Fat Cat series. And I just kind of wanted to continue that series, but in a different way without doing copyright infringement.
Sure, but what is a vintage sweet? What's an example of a vintage sweet?
An example of a vintage sweet is something that you ate in your childhood. Now, at the time, my agent suggested things that were from her childhood, and she grew up in New Jersey, and she suggested things like Malamars and Mary Janes and Whoopie pies. Now, I had never heard of any of those because I didn't grow up in New Jersey. So I was setting my book in Fredericksburg, Texas, and my agent also approved of that. She had actually been to Fredericksburg, Texas, and thought it was a good place to set a cozy, as I did. So I had to get around putting those things in that she wanted to put in, because you always want to please your agent. So I had my character have a grandmother who was from New Jersey, and she got those recipes for those things. Her grandmother was trying to recreate those treats and in her own kitchen, and she got the recipes from her grandmother. So they're sweets from a long time ago. They're still around, but they were a long time ago also.
Yeah, I'm from the East Coast, and I never realized that I've eaten all 3 of those, and I never realized they were sort of from my area exclusively. I thought everybody knew what a Malamar was. So that's interesting. I'm wondering what your favorite brands of candy are and if any of them will inspire future stories. Like you could do erotica with mounds.
Well, yeah, I guess so. There is a lot of money in erotica. I wish I could write it, but I don't think I could. Yeah, I put my favorite old time things that aren't around anymore much are Clark bars, and I did put Clark bars in there. And gosh, I'm blanking now. Twinkies. I have a recipe for Twinkies in the first or second book. That's in the well, it's in one of the books.
You could set one in England and call it Flake. It could be about somebody who was flaky.
I didn't put a recipe for Hostess cupcakes, although I probably should have.
That would be great. So your sleuth is a Maine Coon. Did you just choose it because it was a big cat? And I know a little bit about Maine Coons, but tell the listeners and the viewers why a Maine Coon and what they're like.
Well, my sleuth isn't actually a Maine Coon. My sleuth has a Maine Coon. A Maine Coon is a really cool cat. They're almost not a cat. My son's family had one. It was a large cat, and they named it Friendship. And I used to tease the cat and say he was named Friendship because he was big as a ship, but I don't think he appreciated that. But they're very docile and loving, and they're beautiful long-haired cats with kind of tufted ears. They follow you around like a puppy dog. They are a cat, but they don't have some of the cat-like behavior. They don't ignore you like a cat does. They're friendlier than a cat.
Nice.
They also make their own sounds that other cats don't make. They make little chirping sounds and little cack sounds, which you'll hear a regular cat make a cack sometimes when it's looking at a bird out the window. But these cats do that a lot, and they communicate with chatters and clicks and their own kinds of sounds.
Interesting. Well, what made you choose Fredericksburg, Texas for a setting?
I had been to Fredericksburg several times when we lived near Austin, and I just thought it was a cute little town and would make a good cozy setting. Actually, my husband and I spent a wonderful holiday there once. It was one Thanksgiving when all the kids were obligated to the other side of the family for Thanksgiving, and my husband and I found ourselves alone, and we thought, okay, let's go. There's a lot of wineries. There are a lot of wineries in the area, so we booked a bed and breakfast and headed over there. It was just a short, not a very long drive from where we were. Toured wineries until we couldn't tour wineries anymore. Ate in a bunch of German restaurants and discovered, explored the German roots of the town. It's a German town. We hiked in Enchanted Rock State Park, which is right outside of town, and just had such a wonderful trip. I wanted to share that with people.
Oh, great. Well, you've written a lot. When did you start writing?
Well, I always say I wrote as soon as I could hold a crayon. I used to draw pictures, and I couldn't write. I would make up stories to go with my pictures. I would always tell stories. I would draw pictures, and there would often be a storyline with my pictures.
Oh, cool. So when did you start writing mysteries, and who inspired you to do that?
Well, when I was in grade school, I wrote a couple things that I called novels written on lined paper. They were about 3 pages long. One was about a plesiosaurus who was the Loch Ness Monster. The Loch Ness Monster is actually a plesiosaurus. And in my book. And she discovered a way out of Loch Ness and joined her tribe in the Atlantic Ocean. That was one novel I wrote when I was about 10 or 12. And then during high school and college, I wrote a lot of short stories. I sent them into the New Yorker and what was then called the Atlantic Monthly. It's now just called Atlantic. And collected piles of rejection slips. I had a whole drawer full. Just kept sending them out and sending them out. And one day later in life, I decided I really wanted to get something published because this wasn't working. So the thing that I read the most were murder mysteries, and I decided I should write those because I know murder mysteries. So I started writing murder mysteries, and meanwhile, online came along, and I discovered places to submit short stories. And while I was trying to get a novel written and published, I got some short stories accepted. 10 years later, I finally got a novel published. So it was a long, hard road.
Well, I understand you've had several jobs, including, I'm going to list them, a janitor in a tractor factory, a mental health center secretary, a waitress many times over, a bookkeeper, a short order cook, a mainframe computer programmer, and a nurse's aide. And on top of that, you also play, arrange, and compose for the violin. Have any of your characters held these jobs, or will they in the future? And has this diversity of experience helped you with your writing?
I think so. I've met a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. In the factory, they were people who generally were not highly educated. I actually worked there the summer before I went to college, between high school and college. And the women who worked in that factory had been there since World War II. That's when they started working there. And they were all janitors. We cleaned the foreman's offices on the line and the women's restrooms. And everybody at the factory was very, very encouraging of we three who were working that summer that we should go to college so we could get a desk job. But honestly, it was one of the best paying jobs I've ever had. Factory jobs in those days were good jobs, and they were union jobs. So I haven't had a character that's worked in a factory. There aren't really those factories in this country anymore. I do have a character who is a musician. I didn't make her a violinist. I made her a keyboardist. And I made her a composer. And I also made her a conductor, because that's something that I never did that I think I would like to have done. So Cressa Caraway in my musical mystery series is a conductor. Eventually, in the second book, she gets to be a conductor. That series, unfortunately, was published by Barking Rain Press, and Barking Rain Press went out of business. I am searching for another publisher for that series, and I thought I had one, but I'm not sure I do. So that book has two books, Eine Kleine Murder and Requiem in Red. And I have a third planned if I get that series going back again. Okay. None of my characters have been babysitters or nurses' aides or secretaries.
There's still time.
Yeah, or computer programmers.
Well, you've moved around a lot, living in 9 states. How has that helped you with settings, and why was Minnetonka, Minnesota your favorite?
Well, just Minnesota is my favorite, I think, because it's full of Swedes and I'm a Swede. I just think the people there, they have a reputation for being a little standoffish, but to me they weren't. We had all kinds of neighborhood get-togethers. We had a neighborhood parade on the 4th. The kids would decorate their big wheels and bikes, and lots of cookouts in each other's backyards. In fact, the day we moved in was Halloween, was October 31st. And our kids wanted to go trick-or-treating, but we were, of course, brand new in the neighborhood. We didn't know which houses to go to. And some kids came to the door with their dads, and they said, do you want to go? They saw our kids, and they were wearing their costumes, and they said, come with us. So I stayed home, and the tradition there was the kids did trick-or-treat, and the dads did trick-or-beer. And so my husband was very much in favor of that. It just clicked that way.
Well, I understand that your three children and their offspring are described by you as exceptionally good looking, intelligent, and socially well adjusted. So
Absolutely.
are any children's books in your future?
I actually wrote some books just for my grandkids. They're not really for anybody else. They're very, very amateurly done. And they're drawn, one of them is drawn by me, so it's not very good. But no, not really. The reason I did, because my granddaughter, she was maybe, I don't know how old she was at the time, 5 or 6, and we were riding along in the car, and her parents were talking about one of my books, and she said, "Grandma, are you a book writer?" And I said, "Yeah, I am a book writer." And she said, "Well, can I read one of your books?" And she was very precocious. She probably could have read one of my books at 6, but they were unsuitable. And I said, "Well, no, maybe when you're older." But I decided I should write something that she can read. So I wrote a book about her.
Oh, that's nice.
She didn't have her little sister yet. And then I wrote another book about my next grandchild to come along. And I have 2 more grandchildren, and I owe them a book.
So something planned for the future. So
Yeah.
you've had some books traditionally published and some self-published. Which do you prefer and why?
Oh, I much prefer having somebody else publish them. The only reason my Imogene Duckworthy series is self-published is because that was actually the first series I got a publisher for. But the publisher was very odd and didn't like me for some reason. I kind of got a stomach ache every time I opened her emails because she was so verbally abusive.
Oh, wow.
That book was nominated for an Agatha, and she said, I don't think awards are worthwhile. And she refused to acknowledge that, put it on the website, put it on my cover or anything. And we just didn't see eye to eye at all. So I took that book back the first chance I got, and quickly published the next 2 to have a 3-book series.
Understood. So you've also published over 50 short stories. And I'm curious because the last short story I wrote became my 4th novel. I couldn't write a short story to save my life. So what skills does a novelist need to write short stories? And what are the key differences and what separates someone prolifically published in short stories from someone who is not? So 3 questions there.
Well, the difference between them, I actually just gave a course on that. There are people who are natural short story writers, and there are people who are natural novel writers, I believe. And I don't think you're naturally both, but you can do both if you want to. A novelist writing short stories just has to constrict your thinking. You have to limit your characters, limit your plot and your subplots, and be very economical in your word choice and your phrases. Don't ever use 2 adjectives when you can use 1. Don't use an adjective if you can think of a noun that doesn't need an adjective. Things like that. Yeah, it's complicated to go back and forth. What you need to do in order to write short stories is to read a whole lot of short stories. And to write novels, you need to read a whole lot of novels and take some classes maybe.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the Guppies, where you served as treasurer and then president for a 2-year term. I was one of the Guppies, I think, in your pond. For those who are not aware of this online chapter of Sisters in Crimes, what's special about it and what are the benefits of participating? So you can get some of my viewers excited about it.
It started out as a very small group of maybe 8 to 10 people who were banding together to help each other get published, all unpublished mystery writers and all members of Sisters in Crime. And they wanted to get the blessings of Sisters in Crime for the group and be a formal group. And the Guppies it was the Great Unpublished, GUP. So they were the Gups, and then they became the Guppies, and they're still the Guppies. Sisters in Crime didn't really think that was a good thing for people who are not published to help each other get published. But lo and behold, the group started growing. They encouraged each other, helped each other, critiqued each other, and started getting published. And started heralding other people and helping other people get published. And it's worked out to be a very good thing. So a lot of people wanting to get published join the Guppies and eventually do get published. The Guppies now is over 1,000 members strong. It's an online group, of course, and there are members on several continents. There are classes constantly that are subsidized, really good classes in all kinds of things: forensics, plotting, characterization, you name it, outlining, whatever you want. There's a class in if you wait long enough. I think there's one in humor writing coming up.
Oh, really? You're doing a class on humor writing?
I'm not, but Chris Neary, I think, is doing that class. She
absolutely want to take that. So also, I really enjoyed Guppies while I was with them. I thought it was definitely worthwhile. So if anybody who's watching is interested, you should look into that.
Well, let me also add another incentive for joining the Guppies. There are critique groups and manuscript swaps, and a special group if you're trying to get an agent. It's called Agent Quest. We band together and tell stories about agents and try to get an agent together, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely worth joining. Your review, I didn't realize until I read your bio that you review for Suspense Magazine. Does reviewing help you at all in your writing by expanding your exposure to different types of writing or different authors? And how much time does it take you every month?
Absolutely helps me. They send me books that the publishers send them, and they're all in the crime genre, but they are often books that I would never pick up, authors that I've never heard of, and it does really expand my horizons to be reading those books. And I've gotten exposure to some really good writers that I never would have known about if I hadn't done that. They send me, I used to try to do at least 2 books a month. I fell away in recent years, but I'm kind of back in it, and I'm trying to do more books for them, do a couple books a month.
Wonderful. Well, in my research, I found that you participated in an anthology called We've Been Trumped. And I went to read one reviewer's synopsis of your story, which I'm going to read because I think it showed you were a little clairvoyant. So I'm going to read what he wrote. He wrote, in Kaye George's tale, Ivania figures it out. Things have changed a lot since the imperial regime was established in 2017. For one thing, everyone born these days had to be named after a member of the imperial family. 12-year-old Ivania has been busy bussing tables at Doyle's Diner for 3 years now. Very glad to have a job. The walk to and from work is the scary part of life. One has to worry about crumbling sideways, roving gangs of men since the cops are no longer around, and other issues. It is the 2040s and life is hard, though it could be worse. Some people have been lucky and escaped to Canada. This might be an incredible option for Ivania and her mom, but it is incredibly risky. So, what made you dream that there would be issues with the police? And do you have, I'm just wondering what was left out, because you thought it was so far-fetched, but it's come to fruition since the election.
I'm horrified and aghast that so much of that is maybe on the horizon, you know? That's those stories were written tongue-in-cheek. It's Andrew McCrae's project, and we wrote those before the 2016 election, thinking, oh, look at this clown that's running for president. You know, what would happen if he were elected? Wouldn't that be funny? And let's write some stories about that, because that's never going to happen. And so I wrote a dystopian post-apocalyptic thing. I figured if he were made president, he would want to be the emperor. And I'm sorry to say, I didn't miss the mark by much.
No, you did not. It might be
Nobody
something
ever,
people want to
ever,
pick up.
ever thought that would happen.
God.
Oh.
I think maybe there should be a revival of we've been trumped. To look for it, guys. So back to Deadly Sweet. Would you like to read a few pages for everyone so we can see what that's all about?
I'll start at the very beginning. A very good place to start, as they say. Chapter 1. Tally Holt had been hoping he wouldn't show up today. While Tally was talking, pacing the floor as she heard the news she didn't want to hear, Yolanda burst into Tally's office from the kitchen of Tally's shop. "Who was that on the phone?" asked Yolanda Bella, Tally's best friend. Tally's friend owned Bella's Baskets, the gift basket business that was located next door to Tally's vintage sweet shop on Main Street in Fredericksburg, Texas. Yolanda flounced into the office guest chair, her bright orange and yellow skirt billowing as she sat. Flamboyant was the only word for the way Yolanda dressed, in bright colors that always seemed to swish around her when she moved. It looked good with her dark coloring, wild dark brown curls and flashing eyes that were so dark they were almost black. Tally was quite a contrast with her usual jeans and t-shirt, but as they say, opposites attract. The two, now in their mid-30s, were best friends going back to their school days. "It was my brother Cole," Tally said, stuffing her phone into her pocket. Yolanda frowned. There was no love lost between those two. "Is he coming early?" Tally nodded, slumping into her desk chair. "I'm afraid so. I guess it's good he wants to help, but we don't need him. He was supposed to come late Friday and now thinks he'll get here earlier." She took a deep breath, inhaling the delicious scents of her shop, chocolate and caramel dominating today. The lingering warm fragrance had a calming effect, and her shoulders lost some of their attention. "I thought he was tied up until Friday night. Isn't he doing a big installation in Albuquerque?" "He was. He finished early." Tally neatened the thick stack of job applications that included those she had been dealing with for the last 3 hours. "I think what he really wants to do is to see Dorella." "That's good. That'll keep him out of our hair." "You mean keep him out of your hair, don't you?" Yolanda, Tally knew, would prefer for Cole to stay in Albuquerque forever. They didn't have a good history. Tally loved her brother. She just wasn't ready for him to come quite yet. There was so much to deal with. "Hey," Yolanda said, "was the woman I saw leaving just now applying to help cater? Have y'all had a good turnout with applications?" That was a problem. Yes and no. I mean, I've had a lot of people apply for the job, but there aren't very many I'd consider hiring to help with the reception. Tally shuffled the job applications, pulling out the ones she'd flagged with sticky notes. They were for promising interviewees, the ones who hadn't interrupted the session for a cell phone call, hadn't texted the whole time, hadn't worn rumpled or, in one case, dirty clothing. The chosen few had sat up straight and paid attention to her and thoughtfully answered her questions. The number of those applicants was discouragingly small. The reception was coming up soon, in 3 days. Tally wanted it to be perfect since it was such a special occasion. Hiring people was not her favorite part of being a small business owner, but it was necessary. The job she was interviewing people for today was a bit different. She had decided that the 2 or 3 she picked to do the reception would be considered later for a position at Tally's Old Time Sweets, her vintage candy shop, depending on how they worked out at the reception. "How many did you talk to today?" Yolanda asked. 6, that's all I had time for." "The one I saw didn't look half bad. I'll admit she was one of the better ones. I wish I had time to interview a whole lot more, but I have a shop to run." "It'll be much better when you get some help in here. You're doing everything yourself." Yolanda had an assistant, a young man named Raoul, but Tally was running her place all by herself, having had a run of bad luck with assistants. It was mid-August, and the high tourist season was in full swing. Tally needed more help to order supplies, make her candies and sweets, and sell them and do all the cleaning and neatening that needed to be constantly attended to. "I have to get out of my office," Tally said. "I've been cooped up here for 3 hours." She had closed an hour early at 6 to do the interviews. "Are y'all hungry? Let's go out and get a late supper." Yolanda jumped up. How about that new place? Do you remember the name? You mean Burger Kitchen? Yeah, that's it. Raoul has eaten there, and I think Kevin has too. Perfect, let's do it. Tally took one more look at the applications, stuck 3 of them into her purse, and followed Yolanda. After she locked the back door from the inside, they went out through the shop at the front. Tally, pausing a moment to enjoy looking over the sales room she had worked so hard on, had poured her heart and her money into. Muted pinks and lilacs swirled across the walls, accented with chocolate brown shelving and lit with cute lights whose shades looked like mason jars. The glass display cases gleamed. They'd better, Tally thought, since she had polished them after closing, as she did every night. Do I have very much more time?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll go on a little bit more. She and Yolanda walked across the rustic wide plank flooring to the front door and left, accompanied by the soft chimes activated by opening the door. Oh gosh, Nigel, I forgot about him, Tally said when they were on the sidewalk outside. He'll be rummaging through the cupboards and opening cereal boxes if I don't get home and feed him. I'll meet you there. You mind if Kevin joins us? Yolanda asked. Tally smiled. She didn't mind at all. Of course not. In fact, she was delighted that a relationship was developing between Yolanda and Kevin Miller. He was the proprietor of Bear Mountain Vineyards, the wine shop on the other side of Bella's Basket. Seeing as both Tally and Yolanda were business owners, the 2 women were able to collaborate sometimes, using Tally's treats to help fill Yolanda's gift basket. Despite spending so much time together, it was only a week or so ago that Tally realized something was happening between Kevin and Yolanda. Kevin was older than Yolanda, maybe by 10 years or so, but they hit it off well. It was 9:15, well after sunset. Even though the sun had set, the hot air rippled with excited shoppers and locals on their way to get something to eat or drink, or to see some of the entertainment offerings in the quaint Texas tourist town. The area around Fredericksburg was studded with many wineries, and the Germantown boasted quite a few tasting rooms. See, in about 20 minutes, Tally turned to go the other direction to her rental house, which was only 4 blocks away. We'll save you a seat. And then Tally goes home to feed Nigel, her Maine Coon cat, who is anxiously waiting for his din-din.
Very nice. So that book is on the market and available, I imagine.
Showing backwards or forward?
No, we can see it. It's straight.
Okay.
And available on Amazon and other fine ebook and paperback retailers. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, it should be available almost anywhere.
And what's going to be coming up after that?
After that is the 3rd book called Into the Sweet Hereafter.
Very nice.
That sounds kind of ominous, and it is, of course, people die.
And when is that slated to come out?
That is not scheduled until March of 21. Now, these books, I don't have the other one. Revenge is Sweet came out in March. This one was scheduled for September. Something happened with the pandemic, and it was moved up to June. And they were supposed to be March, September, March. The other one is still slated for March, but it might get moved. I don't know. I've turned it in, and it's well on its way. I expect it might be out before next March.
Perfect. Well, we'll all be looking forward. I want to thank you so much for spending so much time with me today. It has been great. And
I thank you for asking me.
My pleasure. And please stay safe.
Yes, everybody stay safe.
Thank you.